Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. Joining us this week is Guy Royse from Redis, developer advocate at Redis. Sorry, I got that wrong twice. Sorry about that. It's Royce, right?
Royce, yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And well, you're a developer advocate, so you're the right person to join us and talk about Redis and all the other things that are happening in the open source world. So maybe we'd like to start with a quick introduction about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, well, I mean, you said the highlights there. I'm a developer advocate at Redis, and if you haven't heard of Redis, it's a well, most people use it as a cache, but it's got a lot of uses, and we'll talk about those as the conversation meanders. I've been writing software for a little over 30 years at this point. For money. I mean, I wrote software before I got paid to do it. I did go to university. I coded when I was a kid in elementary school, and so I've been coding for uh, both for money and not for money longer than I haven't been. Um, and I've worked a lot of tech stacks over the years. My first professional job was actually COBOL. I am
Wow.
yeah, admittedly, I'm young for someone who has programmed in COBOL professionally. And it was on DOS. It wasn't even on Windows. It was on DOS, and so it wasn't like mainframe COBOL. Although I did do that at university, and I've done a lot of semicolon delimited languages, C and Java and C Sharp, and I tend to do JavaScript and TypeScript nowadays. But I've got a soft spot for a lot of the esoteric languages that are out there as well. And I keep trying to learn Rust, and I keep fighting with the biochecker, and I keep not getting to do enough of it, and then I forget everything I learned, and then I have to relearn it again. So, but yeah, so
Yeah.
long career of slinging code and talking about it.
I've been doing the same thing with Elixir for the record. I'm
I
a
love
long time
Elixir.
Erlang programmer. Elixir is a highly concurrent language based on the Erlang VM. It's great, but it's one of those things where until you get a project you have to work on with the new language, you just never learn it. Like you just try and then go back
Yeah.
and forth.
I actually worked for a small startup very briefly that everything was done in Elixir.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Yeah.
it was my one foray into engineering management, which is why I wasn't there very long. Uh, once a coder, always a coder. And but yeah, it was a small Elixir shop. And it's kind of interesting how Erlang became all the Rubyists moved into Elixir. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of Ruby people now in the Elixir scene. Um, and yeah, but it's a fantastic. It's like a functional Ruby. That's how I usually describe it. But it's a beautiful language.
The virtual machine itself, Beam, which
Oh
is
yeah,
the Erlang machine, it's incredible. It's probably the best VM in the business. It's just perfect for certain types of like high throughput, high IO, many IO operations, lots of concurrency, lots of resilience. It's built for telephony after all, so it's
yeah.
of course it's not fast when you have to crunch numbers, but that's I suppose expected in
I've always
today's day
thought
and age.
yeah, I've always thought actually the virtual machine is the strong part of Elixir and Erlang. I mean, that's actually the magic sauce. Erlang or Elixir is just sort of a friendly syntax on top of Erlang, which is a little more of an esoteric language
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. It's not like a lot of other languages, although everything ends in a period, which reminds me of COBOL.
Yeah.
But I've often thought it would be nice to come up with some sort of semicolon delimited language with curly braces that compiles to you know uh, the bytecode that the beam uses. Um,
I would be surprised if there's something out
yeah,
there
I poked around with a little
someone
bit.
might have tried.
Yeah, but because I have this theory of languages that there's because so many languages are basically descendant from C.
Hmm.
There's a lot of developers know those flavors of language. It's kind of like learning a romance language. And
Hmm.
as soon as you learn romance language, it's like I took Latin in high school, and so then that opens up like French and Spanish and Italian and Romanian and Portuguese, and makes those more accessible. Um, and knowing C kind of opens up a lot of languages, and so if you have a syntax that is familiar to everyone, I actually think it would drive greater adoption of the platform.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Even there's just one big exception, probably, which is Python. But Python had got traction in the academy world because it doesn't, in my opinion, because it doesn't have curly braces and it's pretty simple. on the same way, though, this will attract. I mean, I'm gonna get yelled at for this, but Python is good in a controlled script environment. Like you're doing 200 lines of script to get something done. I haven't seen much that's actually production ready built in Python. Interestingly enough.
I kind of have my hot take on languages there with is, and I say this as a JavaScript person who really likes JavaScript and TypeScript. I really like JavaScript. I kind of don't like TypeScript, but you're forced to use it anymore. Is that both of those are like the top two most common languages. Like if you look at the language surveys on Stack Overflow, um, uh, Python's number one as of last year, and then JavaScript's number two, and then I think it's Java and C#. I think that's the order. I could have C# and Java flipped. But the reality of it is the reason Python is at that list is because of all the AI stuff that's come on that platform, which is really an outgrowth of academia. And if you pull that out and just think of who's building web applications, for example, Python would probably fall much further down the list. And I think the same is true for JavaScript if you remove the front end. And so really the two biggest languages in terms of, like, everyone's got to know JavaScript because if you're building a web app, it's JavaScript, right?
Yeah.
But if you get rid of that front end and you look at just the back end, I think the two winners are probably still Java and C#. And I think Java's number three. I haven't looked at the list I have in my brain, the big four languages that like we focus on when I'm doing developer relations is JavaScript, Python, C#, and Java.
There is a
Because they're
lot
just
of Java out there, to be sure.
Yeah.
Like there's, we work with at SignalWire. We have many enterprise customers. I mean, $1 billion plus companies, and I want to say everybody, save for one, as a Java backend.
Yeah.
One of them is fully embracing the Microsoft stack, so it's probably a C# all the way down. But
Yeah.
all of the others have a Java backend in there. It's just probably the default above a certain size. Which honestly, I can't. As a known fan of Java, I am having trouble explaining over just using C++. But to each his own, right? That's
I remember when Java first came out, my first thought was it was like C++ without all the stuff that makes C++ hard. Uh, that was my
yeah. But
summary of
then
Java.
I guess the trade-off is that it's almost as performant as C++, but it does save you from shooting yourself in the foot a little bit more than
Yeah.
C++.
Yeah,
It's
well,
probably
Java's
just
come up with all of its own unique and distinct ways of making your life hard, uh, as every language does.
well, honestly, every language does. Like I'm a
Yeah.
Rubyist. I've been in Ruby since the early days. I've worked with the core team of Matt, the founders, and Ruby has some very magic syntax in it.
Mhm.
And if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, a very advanced person can actually make code unreadable for anybody else. There's
Yeah.
so many layers of indirections, abstractions, and closures that is, oh, so where is this object coming from? The object is from 4 contexts outside of where you are, thanks to the block. And you just know what's going on there. So it's very easy to make things unreadable. They're very elegant until you try and change them.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of Ruby. I mostly did a little bit of Sinatra, and then a lot of Cucumber test automation when that was a thing that everyone did. Um, and my conclusion with Ruby is everyone, like, JavaScript gets the bad rap for the spaghetti that you can write with JavaScript, but oh my god, the spaghetti you can write with Ruby because you can monkey patch everything, and with the meta programming and everything like that, you can really create some obfuscated code in Ruby. It's powerful, but lots of times it can be read once, write many.
Yeah, you're right. Well,
um,
the problem with JavaScript for me is the tooling. JavaScript itself is fairly elegant. It's got its
yeah,
moments, but whatever. But
yeah,
the tooling around JavaScript is making it almost unapproachable for me. Like I've tried doing anything outside of a simple Express server that just responds to request, and it's too many packages, too much boilerplate. I don't love it, frankly.
yeah. I've been doing a lot of Svelte lately, Svelte 5, and that's feeling pretty nice actually. So,
Well, since you work at Redis, one
yeah.
thing we could go into is I heard there's a new release of Redis coming, which is how long has it been since version 7?
I don't know exactly when version 7 came out. I know
Couple
There was a
years.
7.2 and a 7.4 after that, and 7.4 came out last year. And then, but Redis 8's coming out. Should be out at the end of the month ish. Although I don't think we have an official release date because
7 is almost 3 years. Just for the
oh,
record,
okay,
7.
yeah. I know when I joined Redis, it was I joined Redis in 2019, not 19. I was about to say 1990. Well, wait a minute, no, Redis isn't that old. I joined Redis in 2019 in November, actually, so at the end of the year, just in time for the pandemic, which is an odd time to become a developer advocate. And I think Redis 5 was the version was out there. So in the 5.5 years I've been at Redis, we've gone from version 5 to soon to release version 8. So that's not a terrible major version release cadence.
No, it's probably very close to what it should be.
Yeah. And if you've got version numbers that are growing faster than that, then it's possible that you're just using version numbers wrong. But yeah, Redis 8's coming out here real soon in a week or two. But and release candidate 1 just dropped last week. I announced it on the Redis subreddit, and I've been poking around with some of the things that are in it. I've been poking around, and I've got early copies, so I've been poking around for a while. But yeah, the
So
thing
what's
that
new?
So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we added. Redis used to have like modules, which are just plugins that you could add new data types, new data structures, and commands and that kind of stuff. And we had a bunch of stuff that was in there. All of those modules are now being rolled into the core Redis 8. So when you get Redis 8, you just get those modules. And so that includes things like JSON and Redis. We called it Redis Search, but now it's Redis Query Engine, which lets you search like various data structures that are in Redis. Find me all the hashes that have a field with a state and a value of Ohio, for example, or where a last name matches something, or that kind of stuff. And there's some probabilistic data structures in there. But the exciting one that just came out with the current release candidate and wasn't part of the milestone releases that we did before for Redis 8 is well, I'm excited about this. I was just playing with it for the first time literally yesterday, so it's all fresh in my brain. Is Salvatore, the original author of Redis, is back at the company, and he introduced a thing called vector sets. And go ahead, ask your question. Yeah, I saw your mouth move.
No, I'm very interested in it. I'm very interested in vectors because, as you know, that's the hot thing right now. So
yeah, well, in Redis Search, Redis Query Engine does have a vector search capability in it as well, so you can put vectors and index it and say this field in this hash is a vector, and then you can do similarity searches. Vector sets are sort of a stripped down version of that. Acts like a set or a sorted set in Redis, and so all the members of a vector set have associated with them, of course, a name, an ID for the member, and then a vector. And then also some JSON data as well, which is useful, but perhaps less interesting than the vector itself. And then you can just then query it, just like you can give it a vector and say, give me all the top 3 closest matches to this vector, or you can say take a vector that's in this set and give me the top 5 that are within the closest to that particular member. And so it works a lot like a sorted set or a geo set, more like a geo set really in Redis, but it provides a vector search capability, which is really cool. And it does it does a lot of stuff for you. So it'll quantize the vectors automatically. And I haven't I started looking at this yesterday, so I haven't played with any of those. I just got it to do something. And I did a simple vector search on photos. So I loaded a vector up with a bunch of pictures that I got off of the internet. And then, hey, here's a picture, give me something similar. And I gave it a picture of a raccoon, and then it found all the other pictures of raccoons, that kind of stuff. I like to camp.
Sounds like that's a classic use case for AI. Like everybody's doing similar things right now. So there's someone certainly winning. I see someone emerging at some point, but So, what other features does Redis have that play into AI usage so that people can stop using those weird vector databases that are
What?
everywhere?
Well, I mean, those are really so. There's the vector set that's coming out, and then now just I do want to qualify this as beta, and it's subject to change. So, so if anyone goes out and uses this, just be aware, right? You're playing with new stuff. You can put it in production if you want, but be prepared to have to adapt it. The other big thing is the Redis query engine has a vector search capability as well, but it combines that with like full text search and a bunch of other search things and builds and does a hybrid search. So you can say, well, give me, the top 10 whatevers that match these multiple criterias and multiple criterion singular, multiple criteria, and give me and rank them based on all of those sort of holistically, as opposed
Wow.
to like a filtered search, like vector search. You can say, well, filter out, because I mentioned you could associate JSON with them, and so you can do some things like, well, go through the vectors first and find all the ones that have this JSON with a field with a particular value, and then apply the algorithm, as opposed to doing it sort of together. So the Redis query engine is uh, is more capable, but it's also more complex. Whereas the vector sets are very easy and accessible, but they just don't do as much. And so those are the two big AI capabilities we really have in terms of like the core Redis product. We've got a ton of libraries that we've built around these that work with LangChain uh, and um, and there's a Lang cache that we released recently, which I haven't played with yet, but it's a semantic caching in a box, basically. Um, and there's another one that's in my head right now that came out recently, but there's a good slew of actually some of my teammates are working on all this this technology to use Redis as sort of the short-term memory for all of this AI powered applications.
From my personal experience, re-ranking, effectively embedded, which we're just talking about, is effectively embedded re-ranking is the single most uh, is the most impactful thing you can do to your AI pipeline right now. A lot of
Yeah,
people are just using naive vector search, just throw the three or four top results into RAG, not even understanding what vector search actually does, which is
yeah,
a neighbors finds neighbors in meaning, not neighbors in terminology,
right.
which sometimes. So I have a friend who's running a large legal AI project within university, and they effectively had to almost abandon vector search because in legal
Yeah,
things differ by just a few words, but those words are the only things that matter.
yeah. That makes a lot of
And
sense actually. In that problem domain, AI would actually be a problem.
yeah, they ended up finding a lot of false positives or even literally wrong documents. Then those documents got passed into the AI and you got the wrong answer. But when the question is, I'm allowed to let this employee go without severance pay or whatever, and the AI gets the answer wrong,
Yeah.
now you're looking at a $3 million lawsuit. It's not just, hey, oh, well, sorry, it was wrong. It's you just, congratulations, you just got yourself sued.
Well,
So it's,
medical has a similar constraints, right? Where the actual, like you really want a lexicographical matching, not a semantic matching. Like if you're
yeah.
looking for a particular, I'm going to use the word. Let's say, well, I'm just going to throw out some medical terms because I don't know anything about medicine. If you're looking for macular degeneration, then that's you want to match those exact words. You don't want to get
Yeah.
semantics out of it and say, well, this is other things that are similar to it, and then match glaucoma or something like that.
It's similar to a degeneration or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well,
plus in the medical field, it's like the legal field. A yes or a
you get it
no
wrong.
can be really important. Like this,
You get it wrong, the consequences are dire, right?
will this medication help the person? Yes. Actually, it would kill them, but
Well,
technically, they're not suffering anymore. A GPT will probably tell you that.
you mentioned something that actually struck me as noteworthy is that people are doing vector search and they're just throwing it into a RAG application, and I feel like, I mean, that's not an anti pattern, but it's too narrow of a definition of what RAG is, because
Mhm.
RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And so
Yeah.
the generation is obviously the LLM, and the augmented is you're helping it out with extra information. And the retrieval doesn't say use vector search or don't, do a semantic search. It's retrieve something to help it out. That retrieval could be AI oriented, vector oriented. You could be doing some sort of semantic, if you're like, doing like a general knowledge thing, and you want to retrieve general knowledge. But it also could just totally be pulling the customer data and handing it to from a relational database or something and shoving it in there and having the LLM come up with the information about that. So it's the retrieval part that is the significant part of that pattern, not that it's AI per
Yeah.
se.
It's naive to think that you can just throw a few hundred documents in a vector database, point a query at it, get out the relevant chunks, and go into. I mean, that was 2 years ago. That was a
Yeah.
sensible approach. Now you have to do a lot in front of it.
But
I'll
Luca, I
throw.
saw it on a slide. It has to be true.
Yeah,
This guy at
it
the
was a
conference gave this talk. It was really compelling.
it was a 30-minute presentation, and you're basing your entire product on a
Yeah.
30-minute presentation. You sort of gotta do some more homework. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's clearly.
I, I say this as someone who gets on stage and shows things on a single slide, says it's just that easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to do that, and then I have to I try to backtrack sometimes. Like, guys, this is a presentation. We built it without any care for security or privacy or whatever. I'm just showing you the relevant code, but the non-relevant code was actually more important. It's 10 times as much. So as
Yeah.
long as you state that, it's usually fine. Well, speaking of AI, I know you've been thinking about AI for a long time now. As someone was, I mean, Redis is an integral part of most AI stacks these days. What are your thoughts on AI from the economic point of view of Sexville? Because this is something that's come up on the
Yeah.
podcast every episode because it's where we are, right?
So I have a few thoughts on that. In the short term, I'm not worried. I'm
Hmm.
just using AI to make my job easier. And I find that, like I mentioned earlier, I've been doing Svelte 5. Um, and when I ask ChatGPT to help me with Svelte 5, it keeps bringing me Svelte 4 stuff. And I run into this actually with Node Redis, which is the client for the JavaScript client, TypeScript client for Redis. Is it will sometimes get it will get older style code because it was trained on both the current contemporary and current code. Because like Node Redis 3 didn't use promises and Node Redis 4 does, and it'll generate the wrong code sometimes. Now it's getting better at that, but like with Svelte 5, it's fairly new. Or I've been using Hugging Face for JavaScript, um, the Transformers JS, and it often doesn't know that it exists. And so if I'm doing anything current, like any modern using new libraries and stuff like that, AI isn't actually all that helpful. I mean, it's
Yeah.
because it just doesn't know enough about it. And like I've seen it assume that the Hugging Face Transformers it only knows about the Python version. I say, no, there's a JavaScript version. You should really show me the JavaScript code. And instead of learning about going out to the web or learning about the JavaScript version, what it does is it takes the Python code and just translates it to JavaScript, and then it doesn't work. And
Even
so,
the more advanced, like there's some implementations like editors that are able to access external documentation
yeah,
or look at the code base in GitHub, or they're good, but right now there's still some work to do for sure. I
yeah,
totally agree. It's
yeah. And so it's not a panacea, right? I mean, that's the main thing. Is I still have to think. I still have to second guess what it's concluding. I have to ask the right questions. I found that they tend to tell me what I want to hear. Like I'll ask a question, could I do it like this?
yeah.
And then they'll say, sure, you could do that. And then it'll give me this crazy ass solution that is totally not how you should do something. When I really need to tell me, no, that's a stupid idea. Don't do that. And
You're right. Yeah, that's something that happens a lot.
yeah,
Is if you go to GPT and or whatever Claude, that's any of them, Gemini, and ask a question that has even a hint of a leading answer,
yeah,
like because maybe that's your doubt. Maybe you're asking yourself, I was checking on something about diet and calories and whatever for my wife, and I
yeah,
phrased it like I already knew the answer, right? And the AI just gave me the answer I wanted to hear. We
yeah,
tried rephrasing, and it actually explained it in much more objective way. It was not fully what we thought. So it's pretty that's pretty relevant, right?
Yeah.
If you say, prove to me that something is not true or whatever, the AI will happily just prove it, because
Yeah.
it's executing a command. You're not asking it to check the truth. You're asking it to do your request, and your
Yeah.
request is, tell me that C is not the best language, and the AI will tell you C is not the best language.
Yeah. So I mean, these are all subtle versions of, I mean, ultimately hallucination, which is, I think, I wonder if hallucinating is actually the right metaphor. Uh, it's almost like it's man pleasing. It's
Yeah.
like it's trying to tell you what you want to hear, and if you give it a bad premise, it's going to go along with you, and it has to give you an answer so that you're happy. That's sort of the sense I get from working with AI regularly. Now, I'm sure these things will be worked on and addressed, and it is getting better and better all the time. In the short term, I'm not worried. It still can't do my job. Um, it makes me more productive, so like if I need to do social media posts, I use it to help me craft those. I'll give it bullet lists, it'll expand it out. I'll say no, and then I'll rewrite it in my voice. And then although it's starting to learn my voice actually, and so it's getting better at sounding like me, which is, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But long term, let's pretend, maybe this stuff will plateau and we won't get any further, and maybe it won't. But let's pretend we get into the far future of 10 years from now, and everyone can buy a C3PO like robot that can walk around their house and just do whatever they want for the price of a car. That will be an interesting world.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, we don't have economic models for those sorts of things, but actually we do. And this is a little distasteful, but I'm going to share it anyhow. That's basically a slave economy. You just built mechanical ones, which I suppose is a little more ethical, but it does introduce a problem. Which, like, if you look at ancient Rome, had this problem, and I think we could uh, mimic this problem. Is they had there were a lot of people that weren't slaves in ancient Rome, but they also weren't really of a caliber to do things like start their own business, or they weren't entrepreneurial. They couldn't be the merchant class, and even if they were particularly intelligent, like do accounting and that kind of stuff, it was always cheaper to just buy a slave than it was to pay someone to do it. And so you had this vast group of people that just didn't have any utility in society. And so the Romans addressed this with bread and circuses by basically creating a grain dole and then having games to keep everyone entertained. And I mean, this is grim, but that could totally be a future for us, where if you can replace all of the work that's an average Joe might do, so to speak, or even an above average Joe with humanoid robots in the house and in the factory and everything, then you could run a scenario where there's a lot of people that don't have anything to do, and then some people that have figured out how to exploit this, but not everyone is the kind of person that can do that. I'm trying not to sound elitist here when I say this.
No, you know what, Mary, what is extremely interesting, and we should probably do a part 2 just on this topic.
Yeah.
I've been doing some thinking and even work on the very same subject.
Oh,
Which
really?
is very, very, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, you can already see the phenomenon happening in current industries. The town where I live in Italy, it's called Biella, is where most of the luxury textiles come from. When you buy Gucci, Prada, Zegna, you name it, the actual fabric is made of, well, I mean, I don't buy much of those because those are expensive, but I do have a couple.
Pretty
But
sure all
when
my
someone
fabric was
buys
made in
the
China. Yeah.
when someone buys some of that, the textiles all come from here. What's interesting is that many of those companies haven't increased their revenue much. They're all like 100, 150 years old. Those
Yeah.
companies are. They haven't increased the revenue much. I mean, it's gone up with inflation, the change in currency, whatever. But compared to the amount, let's say this: the amount of fabric they make every year is roughly similar year over year because it's
Yeah.
luxury market. So there's only so many people that would buy a $10,000 suit, right?
Right.
So there's no need to make more. But companies that used to have 2,000 workers now employ 300.
Yeah.
They're making the same amount of textile at the same quality. Nothing, in fact, probably the quality is probably higher because it's more regular. There are no
Yeah.
defects anymore. I have a friend who's lucky to be the heir of one of these huge companies that have been selling wool since the 1800s. And I visited his factory, and it's like a hospital or a high tech science lab. It's like NASA.
Yeah.
You think of a textile place that they take wool right off the back of a sheep and turn it into fabric, and you think it's something dirty and smelly and it's going to be noisy.
Yeah.
It's just a huge floor with 100 people wearing lab coats walking around machines that are almost silent, where things go in and out and just go perfectly smooth. And you can speak at the normal volume on the floor of something like of a factory
Yeah.
like that, which is insane to think about. So what do we do?
Yeah. Well, I think in the short term too, there's a tendency right now for people to want to blame. I think long term, you probably have a period of adjustment where you end up with people that are able to take advantage of that new system and people aren't, and then that can create all sorts of societal unrest, like it did in Rome. And I guess the advice is that in like the long term, if this happens, and we may not be able to solve this problem, right? We may hit a
Mhm.
plateau and AI just doesn't go any further. There may be a maximum viable size for a neural network. I don't know. Um, but the advice for us is probably to make sure that we start businesses in either grain distribution or games. So basically there I think there'd be business opportunities in things that are hobby oriented. If people all of a sudden have a lot of free time, that would be what they would spend their money on, or any entertainment and that kind of stuff. Those become sort of the roles that I think humans would fall into more. But the other thing I've been thinking about in the short term is right now there's a little bit of a tech recession or a tech apocalypse that's been happening. I
Mm.
think a lot of developers who are probably listening to this podcast, some of you may be in this situation where you're having trouble finding a job. There's been a lot of layoffs, and everyone wants to say it's AI's fault, but I don't think that's true at all. Actually,
No.
it's not AI's fault. Uh, it's honestly that AI plus a developer in a cheaper part of the world is cheaper than hiring me. And so after COVID, we learned how to do remote work really well. And so, like in Europe, as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of development work's happening in Eastern Europe. I know Redis has an office in Bulgaria,
Yeah.
um, in Sofia, uh, and I know I've spoken at tech conferences in Eastern Europe, and they're super well attended, like they're huge. Uh, and the stuff's in North America starting to move to. There's a little bit of a movement towards hiring developers in Costa Rica, um, which would be a beautiful place to live. Uh, but so a
Well,
lot
see,
of it is,
many large companies were just waiting
yeah,
for something they could say to their board members before they did the layoffs. Like it's
yeah,
AI. Yeah, totally AI. Yes, right.
yeah.
It's AI.
We're going to take AI and that's going to replace. We're going to say AI is replacing all the developers when really we're going to offshore them. And to be fair to businesses, I don't blame them at all. They're fulfilling their purpose, right? This is what they're for. They want to take the money that people have invested in them and make a profitable business out of it and maximize shareholder value and provide a quality service. That's what they're for. So not like saying "ooh boo capitalism" or anything like that.
And it feels like we are in a very well, we are in the very junction of time at this moment, like of the times where it's becoming very relevant to discuss whether you still want to make things in your own country or outsource development, or what's going to be made here, what's going to be made there, who's paying for what. Sounds like we're kind of in a situation like that. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, so that's awkward.
it's and I feel like we're only started. Honestly, I feel like that there's some Greek philosopher. I hope is Greek. My daughter is in classical studies. She should
Yeah.
certainly tell me I'm wrong, but whatever. That says that you're unlucky if you live in interesting times. Those boring
Yeah.
times are the best. Nothing's happening. But right now we're in a situation where everything is coming to a sort of a point where things have to start moving. Something has to change forever,
Yeah.
whatever that is. Something has to change forever, in my opinion. And it might very well be the balance between trade, manufacturing, where AI, what I see here is that if you know nothing about development, it's not going to make you a developer. But if if you're already a good junior developer and you trust and you still keep yourself informed, you still read documentation, AI is going to make you very productive.
Mm.
As a co-pilot. Like, I want to, this is not copyright infringement. Like, it's
Yeah.
as a helper, before someone, as a helper, AI is invaluable. I'm a very good Ruby developer. I want to say, I hope again. I've been doing, let's say this. I've been doing Ruby for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
And
seasoned. Yeah.
I know what I want to get out of AI, and using AI with programming is helping me tremendously because I know how to evaluate what's being output.
Yeah.
You scan it and say, okay, so this good, good, good. Oh no, this is completely wrong. Let's not do this. Uh,
Or you
that's
know how to
where,
tell it what to generate.
yeah,
Like I can
that's
give
the
it 10
beauty.
bullet, 4 or 5 bullet points, and then it can do a whole bunch of typing for me that I then don't have to do.
I've actually taken to doing something more structured, even like almost write full feature requirement documents. Like it's half a page, a bit more, and I do them either manually or starting with AI and then
Yeah.
refining, and then giving that to AI. That's been my go-to for now. Like you need to be a little more thorough than you think you need to do to be. It's kind of like, in my opinion, I'm used to this because been working with people from all over the world. If you're working with someone that doesn't speak English super well, your specs have to be a bit more precise. And that's just what you do. Just treat it like a very good developer from Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. I I've actually I had a little. I was talking with one of the folks on the VS Code team at a conference earlier this year, and he said that Copilots. Most people just use Copilot. They put a comment and let it figure out what it, put a comment in their code and then let it figure out stuff. Um, but you can actually apparently with VS Code give it a manifest
Mhm.
and tell it, okay, I want you to use React, and I want you on the front end, and then I want you to use Express on the back end, or basically lay out your tech stack. I'm using this database. I want to use this library to talk to that database. And you can spec out all the tech you want to use, and it's really good at actually building like the data access layer. It can do a fantastic job of that, but it falls
Those
down
people,
at the business logic section because it doesn't really
Mhm.
understand what the business logic needs to be. And I threw out this idea, and I think there might be merit to it. That's I mentioned earlier Cucumber and all the BDD Cucumber test automation stuff. And if anyone remembers Cucumber, you had the sort of given when then description of all the things you want your software to do. It was like the idea was to create runnable business requirements. And I think that providing Cucumber to an AI might actually be useful.
Bring
Uh,
back Cucumber.
well,
Wow, that would be.
I know, right? Crazy, right? But it's one of those things where I mean, the AI knows what it is. It's read all the documentation. It was trained on the internet, and so if you give it a Gherkin file
Hmm.
and say, "Build me code that matches this Gherkin specification using this tech stack," I wonder. I haven't played with this. I haven't had time. I wonder how well it would do.
Now I have to try. I like, it's a legal obligation.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, given
But
that
I share this simply. Hopefully, someone starts playing around with this because I think it's an
years
interesting idea, but I just haven't had time to do anything with it.
years ago we wrote a Cucumber extension for telephony to actually test voice scenarios.
Hmm.
So I'm pretty familiar with how it works. Now I'm gonna try. Well, we're getting close to the end of today's episode. So I don't know, Guy. Thank you so much. It's been
Yeah.
great chat going over all of this and AI, especially. We should probably do another episode just on AI and maybe delve into how it could help people get into programming. And also, I need to ask you about the teaching programming to a prison population episode, which we haven't touched on yet. So let's do a part two if you agree with that.
Sure, I'm happy to do a part two. Yeah.
Perfect. So, well, it was great. So thank you very much. Guy Royse from Redis joined us today. We went over Redis, news, and AI, and a bunch of other things. And look forward to the part two. And well, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a ton of fun. Always fun to chat with a fellow nerd.
Rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.